Welcome back, everybody, to the Upskill podcast. I'm Dave, your host, and I'm really, really excited to introduce to you today Rowena Hennigan. She's from Ireland, but she's based in Spain at the moment. Welcome to the Upskill podcast, Rowena. So happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, or thanks a million, Dave, as we say in Ireland. And it's fantastic to join you here from early morning in Spain. It's great to have made the time work for our chat.
Absolutely. I love your office. It looks fantastic. That's your home office, I imagine.
Oh, well, there's a little story behind that, Dave. This is actually, I use the word makeshift or term makeshift very carefully. This is not where I normally work because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm actually based in a corner of a room, and I've sort of set up, this is a bedroom as well. I've set up this home office because actually this is not where I'm normally based. I work in a separate part of the apartment, and also in a co-working space a couple of times a week.
Yes.
But with this, it was strong regulations in Spain. We've been home based fully for 4 weeks almost. 4 weeks tomorrow. And the regulations are quite strong here. So we haven't been able to move around. And to allow me to work, I had to come up with this solution of finding the quietest part of the apartment, to be honest. Yeah, we have a 6-year-old daughter, and we have to homeschool as well at the moment, Dave. So she's far away from me.
You're a busy lady, Rowena. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but it just to also say it's been difficult because a lot of people are in this situation.
Yes.
Even us remote workers who would be quite experienced, and I've been working from home since 2007 on different projects, and the last 3 years full-time from Zaragoza on many projects where I haven't met people, on many projects which are totally virtual and collaborative, Dave. But it's not possible in the crisis to have your normal routine.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's working, but it's not perfect.
Absolutely. And my listeners, 80% of my listeners are based in Vietnam. And you're right, it is getting used to a new routine and new habits and, having that independence, having that mindset to cope with adjusting to a remote working way of living, as well as taking care of the family and taking care of the kids. And being based in Vietnam, it is a struggle for a lot of people. That's why you're here as the expert to hopefully guide and provide insight into remote working skills and the future. So happy to have you here. Yeah.
Thanks so much, David. First of all, I'd love to say, and I've got my little coaster here, my memento. I've mementos around my makeshift desk, and that's a coaster from Vietnam because I've traveled there and I have family who live in Asia. So I loved my cruise on the Mekong. I really enjoyed the cuisine in the country. The beach is fantastic. So I just want to share with your listeners, the Vietnamese that might be listening, that this empathy first, to say to them, this is not normal remote work. It's working at home in a crisis. It's not, the routine isn't there. We're integrated with our home life, thrown in a situation. We could be constricted with space, with noise, loads of challenges and distractions, for example, because we have other responsibilities on top of us.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to separate life and work in this situation. So the first thing empathy. The first thing I want to say is empathy.
Yeah.
And interestingly, people think of others when I say empathy sometimes, and I advise on that at the moment. They start thinking of, and this is natural, and you might think, about other people. Try and start with yourself.
Exactly.
Try and start with yourself and say, wow, I'm in a crisis. This is challenging. And start with simple things that you can do to take care of yourself. And believe me, Dave, a lot of that is not about work. It's doing yoga. It's doing whatever helps you feel good to mind yourself. You probably know the Irish say, mind yourself. It's a little term we say, take care of yourself. And I think that's very important at the moment.
Absolutely. And, being based in Vietnam, my wife is Vietnamese, and, we have extended family here in Hanoi. A lot of people I talk to as well, outside of the family, people, my connections on LinkedIn especially, they they do find it extremely, the idea of working from home and learning from home is just so exhausting, just thinking about it. And like you said, like creating that space and starting with yourself first, in coping with the whole crisis situation, as you mentioned. So
yeah, and I think it's also interesting to when I started working from home initially in 2007, and this will be the same for a lot of people, it was by chance. It was an opportunity on a project with the telecommunications company at the time, where I was doing 2 or 3 days a week from home, because I was also traveling a lot on that project within the UK and Ireland. So they said, just at the time, they had flexible policy, and I was doing maybe a Friday.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as extreme as what this change is in reality for many people.
Absolutely.
And we need to stop and acknowledge it's like being thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no transition period for many people.
It's a shock to the system. It's a real shock, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So with those words like empathy and shock and that real wow, first of all, as I said, take care of yourself. But secondly, it's really good to acknowledge there will be a period of transition, that it's going to take a week or two to even feel any kind of routine or any kind of comfort. And, for people listening that might be at that initial stage of shock, I also want to share that with them and say, even if they could keep a little journal, Dave, a little note at night, I'm waving my notebook, just to sort of say, I'm on day 3 or 4, this is hard, write down whatever they're feeling, or speak to a friend if that works better for them, but express it in some way. And also try, a little tip that is good, is just try to focus on the positive, okay? So even if they're listening to this podcast to get some advice, that's a positive.
That's a positive, yeah.
Right? That they've realized they need some support, even if they've searched a few articles on the web, whatever, that they're reaching out and looking for help. It's a start, and it helps you to start to transition.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Being in Vietnam as well, communication, now families have to communicate with each other like they've never done before, not just with their family members, because as you know, in Vietnam, it's the opposite family structure to the nuclear family structure we have in the West, with extended family living together. So there's a lot of pressures and complications there. I'm sure the listeners will understand deeply about that. But also now with, talking and discussing and with your manager, with your company, with your colleagues, all on top of that, how do you suggest people cope with that if being in this shock situation?
Yeah, well, what would be good for someone is to ask themselves how they express. So back to that word express. I mean, for me personally, I write and I draw a little bit, like I draw, which is the same, I get it down with a pen or whatever. But it might be interesting for people just to try that. It's called free writing, just to write a bit, draw. Over a couple of days, just free expression. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. And they can write down whatever they feel in terms of their feelings, okay? But also look at how they're communicating. So maybe just write, because of the structure, and I understand, they might not find that they're able to express to themselves, right?
Exactly,
and it's called in English self-talk, or that little bit. And you get it from either writing for yourself or even talking to yourself. I have a simple dictation app I use, where it works on desktop. It's free. And sometimes I turn around here on my desk and I look out the window without the screens, without the pens and paper. And I just talk to myself to reflect. But all of those are personal. And I think that's interesting, given the as you say, the family setup there and the way the structure is. So maybe you would have some feedback on that, because I feel we're a bit bombarded with everyone being around, and that time to yourself might help.
Absolutely. Now, luckily, in Vietnam, of course, we have a lockdown situation as well. Not as strict as in Spain, but the situation in Spain where you are is very severe, isn't it? Yeah. Could you tell, maybe share the listener exactly?
It is. Well, we've got regulations, strong regulations that are being policed, which means we can only go outside for essential trips, so pharmacy and limited shopping. But it's also extremely strict for children. So children, are officially not allowed out. Again, a pharmacy trip if you have the documentation.
Right.
So we've been quite restricted and on top of each other. And I guess going back to the previous point as well, when I write in my journal at the moment, I even write like find time for myself to remind me to go over into a room and have 10 minutes of listening to something on my own, or 50 minutes of yoga, because space on my own, whatever you choose to do, because we're on top of each other and we're not getting to go out and just stretch our legs on our own, have our walk on our own, go for our cycle, whatever it may be. And so I think that's what works for me. But it's just avoiding those things that make you feel claustrophobic or that affect you in your individual situation. And just to say, I'm talking to people in France, in the UK, in America regularly. Every country is different. And we said about empathy, Dave, and that's also important, that individual countries are very different, regions.
Yes.
But then when we're talking and reaching out to people, just to be really aware of how it could be so different for them.
Exactly.
Could be so different, and start being really open to hearing that and listening.
You bet. I think that's a great, I try to do that as well. I try to get, I selected maybe a positive video to watch in the mornings, and I do a little bit of, stretching and exercising just in the afternoon after some work. But I think my listeners will be able to apply those tips to really improve their situation. Thank you for sharing that. Now, moving on a little bit, I mean, I've checked out some of your videos on YouTube. You have a website, rowenahennigan.com. There, you have a blog. You've got a lot of, you love writing, and I've been reading some of your blog articles, and I recommend the listener to check it out. I'll put the link somewhere here so that listeners can read it for themselves and maybe share with their friends and colleagues. But what I found really interesting is at the Technical University in Dublin, since you're Irish, you founded a course called the Future of Work module. And I almost went to TU Dublin many years ago. But could you share with the listener why you founded, it was a bachelor's degree, right? A bachelor degree course?
Yeah, it's a module on on an undergrad degree at the moment. And we actually, this time last year, we ran a conference at the university, a physical conference when we could all get together. And it was one of the quite innovative, because it was looking at what academic research there was and what best practice there was from industry in remote work and from remote work companies. And we were all gathered together in Dublin last April. Which was nice. And as part of that, I met two other colleagues, one other communications expert at the university, Maeve Coleman, and a legal and HR expert called Marion Jennings. And we started collaborating, the three of us, on this idea. And we managed to get the module off the ground. Level 8 is an undergrad award if you complete the module separately. But to start off and get it in place, Dave, it ran last semester from September to January, just finished. And it's looking at future of work with remote skills heavily within it. And it's looking at taking students through, so students attend classes for 2/3 of the time, but a third of the module is fully online. And I teach on it virtually from Spain. So that's the innovative part of it. Right. And it's looking at how they would use remote work skills as HR managers. It's a HR degree, HR management degree. And we mixed up the delivery method. That's what might be of interest to people as well. So bringing me co-founding it with the other two authors, or co-founders, we said, let's get Rowena delivering so that the students have to attend these virtual sessions as part of the course. But we also used really innovative techniques to test the students. And I'll just give you an example of one. We got them to run loads of online meetings in different groups. and take turns as moderators, so that they practically learned, for example, to do a little of what you're doing today, okay? How to interview, how to moderate a meeting. And I think your listeners will find that interesting, because what we're trying to do is work on those real practical, real life skills.
Excellent.
For people coming out of the degree. And that would be one example how it would be really practical innovation in terms of your skills.
Indeed. And I think the listener to this podcast, you know, there are many human resource people listening to this podcast, people in learning and development, and also students and professors as well. And, you know, this is super valuable at this time. So thank you for sharing that. That's really, really interesting. So yeah, it's all about the future of work and honing those remote working skills. And I love how that module really focuses on the practical nature, you know, and, you know, like for the first time, I remember one of my family members, they were an English teacher working, you know, at the school in a physical environment. And all of a sudden now they have to embrace, somewhat begrudgingly, but they have to embrace like the online setup, and they've never done that before. You know, it's the first time that they've used an online classroom, and they're being, you know, asked to teach from home for the first time in their careers, and they haven't had a course, they haven't had any preparation. And, you know, that's just one person. I'm sure it's happening to tens of thousands of teachers in Vietnam every day right now. So
yes, and the thing is that everyone's been thrown into this world.
Yeah.
It's happening to lots. I'm sure it's happening to lots of the teachers. Some of the universities, as you know, and their support systems, they've had this partial or part of their courses available online, because you work in learning and development as well. But it's totally different midway through a course day being told to deliver the second half, you know, so I can really empathize with that now. Actually, the 2 or 3 courses I continually teach on, this is interesting, postgrad courses as well at TU Dublin, they're designed to be delivered remotely. They're distant learning as well. Excellent. They've got a mixed model. So it hasn't affected those courses so much over this period.
Right.
But I know other colleagues, just by chance for those courses, but I know other colleagues are struggling. And I would just say, there is some really good resources out there to any other professors or academics that are listening, teachers that are listening. You know, again, the same, be empathetic with yourself. One of the things that I've found that's worked is, amongst my colleagues, is to look at these live sessions so that students can interact, because I believe, because we've been suddenly isolated, and from hearing from other colleagues that they've helped running some sessions that are live as a quick plug-in to be thrown to figure it out. Because at least then you can figure out over 2 or 3 weeks of doing that what the students are really struggling with, because you haven't designed that part of your course to be delivered completely virtually.
Absolutely, yeah.
So go and get some feedback in those sessions and be there for your students. I know that's working for some of my colleagues, so I just wanted to say that in terms of that, but also picking up on your point for the HR professionals and other people in industry. One thing I want to say is, don't be afraid to test and trial different things. So if you're thrown into the situation of having to run a meeting, think of what I said there. If you were back in uni doing this with time to prepare, if you were in a remote work company, they would put you on an onboarding or on a training course. You would probably do a few live sessions, something like we're doing now. And learn it practically. So there are lots of resources, and I'll share some things afterwards through, because I also am working on another project I'll tell you about in a minute.
Please,
that is organizing remote work resources and webinars that are free, okay? But excellent. I would also suggest within your own community, HR people that are listening, why not try and buddy up with some people and say, let's us run some webinars together or test online meetings and go from there.
Fantastic, because it is a confidence thing, Rowena. You know, I do. That's the biggest challenge now. People think, oh no, I can't learn those skills. Oh no, I'm self-conscious of seeing myself on a video camera. We need to get over this now, right? We need to get through this period. Yeah. So confidence, and
Exactly.
believing that you can learn a new technical skill or hard skill, and it isn't. Let's be honest, it's not rocket science, right?
No, but it's practice makes perfect.
Practice makes perfect. Yeah.
I mean, even me with all these years of experience, I still have to keep honing my skills. I still have to, if I'm told to use a new video conferencing tool, I need to go off and do a tutorial. We're constantly learning. But I think to motivate or hopefully inspire some people listening, it would be really good to try and see the crisis as an opportunity for their learning.
Excellent.
Okay. And you can, for example, I'm working on a collaborative project with another colleague, and we've developed a website called Remote Work Tree. And it's got lots of free resources, Dave, but also a section with webinars, free webinars and events.
Excellent.
On remote work. So people listening, what they could do is they could start by attending some of those webinars, and we can share it after. They're free, so they can just join and listen. They can ask questions if they do feel comfortable. They can listen on playback. But if you do 2 or 3 of those, if I can get a listener to think of doing that, and then just say to a contact or a colleague, I saw one that was really good, and they did this, like they moderated, they did a bit of interactivity. Let us try and do that on a Zoom call together.
Why not? Why not?
And why not?
You've got nothing to lose, and it's all experience, it's all confidence building. Love it. So what's the website again?
Remoteworktree.com, and it is 3 weeks ago. It didn't exist as a website. It's a passion project. So it's a passion project of myself and a collaborator, a lovely guy, fantastic guy called Robert Kropp, he's American, he's based in Barcelona. We've never met, interesting fact, Dave, but we were chatting to each other at the start of the crisis hitting Spain, and we said, let's try and pool our knowledge to build a website which had all the resources that we thought were valuable together. But we've got learning paths in them, Robert. Robert and I recommended, we started saying, well, let's put learning paths in them. So that the idea is, Dave, that if a manager comes onto the site or an individual, they have a set learning path of resources to follow. So I just think that would be really useful for your listeners.
Exactly. So I recommend everybody to go to the website. I will provide a link somewhere here. You'll find it. Sign up. Go with Rowena. Check it out. It's going to bring you value. Share it with your colleagues. Anyone listening, just now is the time. Now is the time to, as Rowena said, take this as an opportunity to upskill. Right. That's why we're here.
Exactly. And the events section, because we added that this week, has lots of free events. So just to add join a couple of those events, interact if you can, but try and take away, if you're nervous at all about working remotely, try and take away a little action that you agree. Because if we turn learning into action, Dave, you'll know this, if we turn it into doing something and practice, it really embeds it in our brain and our body, and we get better.
You bet. But just for the listeners' benefit, the skills, you talked about moderation, in how to interact, kind of chairing a meeting. Those are kind of some skills that they can practice.
Yes.
Right?
So what would be good would be to observe. That's why I'm saying start off softly with yourself. Start off on a first step where, for example, if you join a webinar, just notice how a host might introduce people, how they might encourage interactivity, what functionality they use. It's called moderation or hosting a session. And then just start to make a little list. I mean, there's other articles out there you can find, but the point is that if you note these things, and then on the next session that you run with a couple of friends or whatever you decide to do, if you just say, I'm going to try introducing, I'm going to try moderating more, like encouraging chat in the chat box, asking people for Q&A, trialing and testing the different functionality. But that's a really interesting point that you've brought us on today, because what we're talking about here are not exactly tech skills. Okay, you might need to know how to hit the button on the conference.
Absolutely.
but you said something there. You said or hinted at. It's about being a little bit brave, about trying the things, and also what works for you, what you're comfortable with. And this is more about our sort of our soft skills. They're called soft skills. I don't like it. Our power skills.
Yes, essential skills.
Essential skills, exactly. Transferable skills. So being a little bit more sort of, how could I use that? And I just want to, because some people that are listening might say, well, I'm not that, I'm a bit nervous. I'm a little bit.
Exactly. I'm not a technical person. I'm not,
technical,
all those excuses, right?
Yeah, exactly. They might straight away go in and say, I don't like to run even physical meetings, in-person meetings. I don't like to run them. But you can do it really gently, and you can find innovative ways to do it that suits you and your group of people you're working with. So I want to show you something. If I was agreeing with you saying that Vietnamese food was fabulous, I could use a card, right, and really delicious, like this, to show my support. So what I'm showing you is a visual cue card, okay? Right? And it's used on video meetings by remote teams. It's a sample of one.
So that's called a visual cue card.
Cue card, or visual cue card, or a visual collaboration card.
And why is visual important? Why is that effective?
So just like we decided today to record a video as well, so we could see each other's eyes and smiles, and I could demo some of my props from Vietnam, and I could show you different things like the visual cue card. It's really important in international communication, in communication in general, to be able to see each other, because we can see each other's facial cues, we can see each other's movements. We can also make sure we're paying attention, which could be an issue on bigger meetings.
That's a big one now.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, exactly. And also we can have a much more effective, I want to use that word carefully though, but at the moment, if we're worried about a colleague or a teammate, if we want to get a point across of concern or care, or really try and pitch a new way of working, for example, or make a point, a strong point, if we can see each other, we can be much more effective in our communication day. So visual, both what we're doing on video, and also visual, like I've demonstrated, there is some ways to really express ourselves in a different way, right? So I want to give you an example. When I do webinars like this, I sometimes say to people, I like to start my work day with some rituals, some little things that I do. Okay?
Routines.
Routines, little rituals and routines, little things that get me going. For example, I might have a shower, I might have a stretch on the balcony. I might do these little things that we mentioned to get me into my day. But I also like to set the day with an intention. It's just a simple thing. And I usually light a candle, okay, to set my day with a little intention for a productive day, a empathetic day.
Exactly.
Right? And I explain that to people on calls. And I use the candle and I show them the candle. Now, I feel that gives a little part of me and shows who I am and demonstrates it in a way to make a meaningful connection.
Yes, and just for the benefit of the listener, a candle in Western culture is really a symbol of hope. It's a symbol of freedom, passion, calmness, and also it's a little bit spiritual, isn't it, as well?
Exactly. And I know that another little thing, just that might be, this is a little bottle of essential oil, water and essential oil.
Yes.
Because I love smells. That's why I have the candle as well. And sometimes I spray this at the start of the day as well. So I'm explaining for two reasons, to show you how that hopefully helps you connect with me on a personal level. Right? Because I visually demonstrated that and shown you that, but also because I want to signify the start of my work day and have a routine that starts my work day. And
wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah.
Okay. So So like maybe you'd like to share with me, you said that you stretch, you do, but we start to make connection, meaningful connection day when we do that as well.
I even to this day, I struggle, for example, but I mean, I do it successfully, but it is a constant battle, because in the morning, I want to have my personal time before I start my day. And I have to be very conscious about the thoughts coming into my mind. That is, if I start thinking about an email that I have to write, or if I start thinking about that telephone call before I've actually started, I really need to kind of remind myself, no, not now, not yet. My day hasn't started. I'm still drinking my coffee. I'm still watching my motivational YouTube video, right? Yeah. I really have to. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I do things before I come into the space as well.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a nice way to talk about both those visual, why they're so important, and also those visual cues and how we communicate, especially virtually. And also it's also a nice way to acknowledge how important routine and schedule are in these challenging times, Dave. So we've covered those two things there, because we feel bombarded, we feel distracted, we feel we don't have control. Little things that we can do every day help us, just small things, even if it's 5 minutes of deep breathing on the terrace.
Love it.
Even watching whatever works for you, but it helps bring us back to ourselves a bit.
A sense of sanity. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And being grounded. Okay. Well, let's move on a little bit, shall we? Should we now be thinking about remote working skills differently? Should everyone be developing remote working skills at the moment, and why or why not?
Well, I can't comment. I mean, I know globally people are talking, a lot of experts are talking about, surely companies, a certain percentage of companies, Dave, after this, and a combination of those companies saying, this worked for us, let's keep going, and update our policies to keep flexible working policies, either offering some or partial or full potential to their employees to remote work. But also some people, or many people, are enjoying it to a point, or are saying, actually, once I got over the transition period, and I'm trying to paint the picture of hope as well for some of the listeners, that they found a routine, they found they were productive, right? So I think that, first of all, there will be this potential for companies, and I'm not going to look into a crystal ball and try and guess how many or anything, but I think there will be a potential that people and companies who have noticed it have worked will want to keep going, right? So I think that will mean that, yes, there's going to be more demand for remote skills. But I also think in general that if people notice, and I'm going to come back to a point earlier about recording what you notice that you're managing to do, the positives out of a day. If you build up that journal or that awareness, documenting it, writing it over these weeks, you might start to notice things like, I notice when I'm active listening on a call or paying attention. I notice that I like webinars for learning, because what we're also, apart from remote working, we're also in this cocoon or in this place where people are noticing more about how they learn and how they work. And I think there's a potential from that. So I'll give you the example. I noticed that if I turn away from the screen, block out the screen and talk to myself, which I shared, that free thinking, that free talking to myself was much more creative. And lots of my colleagues and even people who have been thrown into it have noticed that they learn and they work in different ways. The other thing is, some people have noticed that they are productive under pressure. That will make sense to people listening.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. But I've also seen a lot of rhetoric and talk about being better organized. So I propose that the 2 hours of work you may be getting done in the morning or the afternoon, because you're juggling commitments, have you got much better at organizing those 2 hours? And some people are saying they are. So they are getting better. So if that takes that question along a bit, that we look at it in a kind of bigger picture, I think there's lots of potential. Yeah, interesting.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
And you know, you're absolutely right. And I do feel that people, in some way, they want to push away remote working. They want to say like, no,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I want to really get back to the physical environment.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, you know, they say, you know, it's not for me because if I embrace remote working, then that means I have to work all the time at home and I have to work, you know, I can never have my free time. It's like a kind of attack on your personal freedom, like, no, I'm not going to do it kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's not one size fits all. And I know it
Mm,
may be different for Vietnam in terms of their stage. Like it's interesting
mm,
because we're all at different stages of experience as countries, as regions, sometimes as within regions, within countries, like
yeah,
smaller counties, etc.
yeah.
They're at various different stages of both experience this pandemic, but also their take on remote work. So if you looked at Ireland so many years ago, you wouldn't think that remote work as an island on the periphery of Europe was very big. And it wasn't, but dig down and there were many international people working for international companies in rural places who were
Mm-hmm.
remote working. But they were under the radar because they were, they weren't profiled as much. And the thing is that it's beginning to spread, okay? It's beginning to
Yes.
spread. But I want to make a point to everyone listening. I am not like what I shared at the start, right? I'm a human being. We need social connection, right? We need it, okay? So it's not an all or nothing, to make that term clear. The most effective remote workers will
Mm-hmm.
be very good socializers as well, or at least recognize that they need to go and meet a friend for coffee in the middle of the day. They need
Yes.
after work to go to an exercise
Yeah.
class and grab a walk with a friend. They're
Yeah.
still very social people. If they choose it, if they
Mm.
choose to remote work, it doesn't mean they're locked away all day. There's a bit of a picture of,
Exactly.
and also there's mixed models, Dave. There's hybrid, there's co-located. I don't want to go into all the jargon, but there's what works for you. So I gave the example that I would go to a co-working space and I would share my husband's twice a week.
Yeah.
Normally it was twice a week.
Yeah.
I would go there for operational reasons as well, because I could use a room, a dedicated conference room there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
etc. But I would mix with his colleagues, my friends
Yeah.
there. We would go for a coffee.
Yeah.
I got out of the house to work. Lots of remote workers work in separate, you have co-working, I'm sure, in
Yep, we
separate
do.
locations, in shared office spaces, in some go to libraries, some go
Yeah.
to coffee shops that
Yeah.
have a quiet corner, whatever. It's about getting out. Some do walking meetings. Like I've done walking meetings where I go for a
Fantastic. Yeah.
walk and for 10 minutes, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have my meeting. There is a misunderstanding or a sort of confusion that we're stuck in these little boxes.
Exactly. And that's exactly the mindset that I'd like my listeners to start embracing, listening
Mm,
to Rowena, is that,
mm,
you know, you have options. And going back to your point about productivity, you know, it's not about sitting at home at your desk for, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day. It's now about maximizing your individual productivity so that, you know, maybe the day at work you had in the office of 8 hours, you can kind of compress it down into, you know, 4 or 5 hours. And it's based on results instead of,
exactly.
and that's something I just want to touch on is
Yes.
how remote working is now more about results driven rather than. Mhm. Could you maybe?
Yeah, well, we discussed, because my little
Yeah,
motto is
yeah.
work, hashtag work is not a place. So that
Ah,
sums that up actually really well, what we've just discussed. But
right.
yes,
Yes.
the point is it's about productivity as well. Okay. And so many remote teams that are set up properly, or many remote companies and many freelancers, it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
because the gig economy and freelancers are because they are their own bosses often, right?
Right.
And they're very productivity based, very task and deliverable based, because they rule their own projects like I do. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
decide
Yeah.
and I
Same
have my
here. Yeah.
project deadline.
Totally understand.
So we do that naturally as part of our framework for operating, Dave. And the thing is, that's what drives us and that's what we measure ourselves by. And that might sound strange to some listeners, but other listeners may say, oh, okay, I get that. So for example, if I have a report to finish, just to get personal, demonstrates this, and I need 4 hours or 6 hours, I know that I need to finish that report and get it to an editor or whatever it may be, final sign off. And I know I work best in a very quiet corner of the library. Then work is not a place and I go and do that. And I deliver it at the end. There's Wi-Fi in the library, I finish it, I send it. Okay, that's my productivity deliverable. But also the bigger picture to let people know is corporates, commercially, and industry are moving this way because of technology. So the bigger established or longer established remote companies, Matt Mullenweg, who founded WordPress in 2005, who owns Automatic, the holding or bigger companies Automatic, he talks about this. He talks about it being productivity based. They are not tracking your hours online, which may sound strange to some of your listeners, because I know that that might be a different thing to take on board for certain listeners in Vietnam, but depending on who you work for. But very much it's not presence based, it's productivity based.
And
So, and the deliverables are tracked using technology, and it's about your productivity.
Excellent. And that's super, super interesting, because in Vietnam, a lot of companies now are really at the very beginning of their, let's say, their digital transformations. And the first step has been, over the last month, let's say, has been finding and implementing just communication tools. For example, Google Teams and Zoom meeting, trying to get that up and running, trying to get people on it, and those kind of things. That's really the first step. But then there's the other step now, which you're talking about, is moving into now managers having to trust their workers because they can't see them anymore. Where did my workers go? And a lot of managers and companies are very worried about this, because they have been very, traditionally speaking here, it's, hierarchical organizations, very, order and instruction driven. And, I can see my staff like this. And now suddenly, no more.
No more. But I mean, and then, as you exactly said, it's a case of trust. Okay. It's a case of trust. A trust isn't built overnight in situations like this. And so also to point out that if an existing traditional company or operation is moving to the remote model, it can be more challenging because they're trying to change an existing culture. Okay. Right. It is totally possible, but anyone listening that's going, this would be hard here because of X, Y, Z. Yes, it's not always easy. Okay. I'm not saying it's easy, especially if you have an established routine. It's like trying to establish a totally new exercise routine if you've been very, very sedentary or you haven't exercised.
And we all know how difficult that is, to start a new exercise routine.
It's a totally new mindset and approach. But I have to say to you that the foundation is trust. And you touched on it, Dave. And what we can do, if individually this resonates with you, if you're listening and you go, but I think that's okay. I'd like to trust, even if you're a manager, even if you're just someone who works, working on a small team. I want to plant the seed that you can start with trust, and trust then will spread. Okay. Because if you demonstrate trust in your day-to-day operations and the little things that you can make a difference in, if you demonstrate trust by saying, I'm going to contact one of my colleagues that wants to do some video call work, and I'm going to trust that he or she and I can work together, and I'm going to show it. Trust, if you give trust, you often get trust back. Like our arrangement here, we trusted each other, it would happen. Of course, in my experience. Now, I appreciate it's different country to country, but let's change what we can, okay? And if we start with ourselves and use that's my recommendation to people, because I have seen in my time in this world that it works. If you start, it will start to trickle out.
Very well said, Rowena. So for managers listening, show that you care, be there, give a supporting hand, do what you can. Like you said, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So this is the time for trust.
This is the time for trust, and start with yourself. You're trusting yourself at the moment. We will all get through this together, but I think it's a fantastic opportunity in small ways to start trusting your colleagues, your staff if you're a leader, and start there, because then it begins to build. It begins to build.
You bet. And just the last question before we end up here: are remote working skills here to stay, and why?
Well, I hope. I think they are. Even from the nature of us saying that people, they are forced, and I know it's not out of choice, but within that, people will realize the positives. And I think even if you've been dragged screaming and kicking to have to do a video conference or to attend, I'm sure most people can come away and say, well, that worked. Maybe things didn't work on it, but certain things might have worked. And if you look at the positives, that's starting to build the skills. Okay. Be honest with yourself as well. If you've enjoyed it, write down the things you've enjoyed that have worked, and try and build on those skills, like we said already during the conversation. And then the last thing is to tie up some of the things we've talked about as well. It's not an all or nothing, okay? It doesn't mean just because you like doing video calls, you're going to spend the rest of your life just on these remote skills. It can be a mix of things that we bring together in our working life, days in the office, having our normal meetings, but then maybe taking the flexible offer if it's there after all of this, because you've noticed, for example, you're good at certain work at home. If you're left to do it your own way, that you're good at it. And mix it up, because flexibility really will help us going forward. And I want to make two other small little points on that to keep people motivated. Also, think about your commuting time. We didn't mention the word commute.
Commuting is traveling time.
Traveling to work. And so many people find, even if they can reduce commuting 1 or 2 days a week, that they gain hours in their week, which really personally helps them.
Interesting.
Has many benefits.
We don't have that model here yet. Maybe with just 1 or 2 or a few handful of companies, they might give 1 day off for work, to work at home. But that's really a new model here. Okay,
well, but just to say that if they did do that, then workers get the commute time back. Okay, right? If they did do that, this is the benefits that other countries have noticed, which decreases congestion and helps the environment on a regional basis. Okay. So just for some people, I could do a whole separate session on the full benefits and the sort of knock-on indirect benefits, they're called, of remote work for the environment, for society. There's a whole load out there on that. But I wanted to mention that before we finished up, so that people realize that in certain regions that have done this, they've had massive environmental benefits, etc., etc. So I feel we have a part 2 coming up soon. In a couple of weeks or next month. Would love to have you back. It's been a wonderful chat with you, Rowena. You're absolutely fabulous. How can people, my listeners, get in touch with you? What's the best way? Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so please reach out, Rowena Hennigan on LinkedIn. You'll find me on rowenahennigan.com, or Row Remote, which is my sort of shortened name because people call me Row.com, and on there you'll find links as well, and we can provide it on the podcast for the passion project, the resources site, Remote Work Tree, which again is a great place to start if you're looking for remote resources, events, and also it has that learning path framework for managers and individuals. It will take you through suggested research resources that have been researched and laid out in a nice learning path for you. So I would highly recommend that your listeners check that out too, Dave. Absolutely. Well, thank you once again for joining me on the Upskill podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope the situation in Spain gets better, and I hope to see you again soon for another episode. Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks very much, Dave. Yeah. Take care. Take care now. Bye-bye. Yeah. Bye.